In this video, I'm going to show you how to create an add-on domain for your Bluehost account. So I have created an account with Bluehost, and they are hosting my main domain, which is deliberatepersonalfinance.com. And now I want to start another website. So in order to do that, I can just create an add-on domain. Now the beauty of this is that it basically creates a completely separate website, but it just piggybacks onto my Bluehost account, so I don't have to pay anything extra. For the same $7 a month, I can, in theory, have as many websites as I want and just create those different websites by adding add-on domains. Now, even though it's an add-on domain, it's really no different from my main domain for people who are visiting the site. So when they visit this new site, it's going to look exactly the same as my main domain. It looks like a completely separate entity. So for $7 a month, like I say, you could theoretically create as many websites as you want and host them under the single Bluehost account. So although Bluehost doesn't charge you anything extra to add on these extra domains, of course, they all do require a separate domain name. So there is going to be a charge for registering the domain name, which is generally about $10 a year or so. So as I mentioned in my previous video, I do not register my domain names with Bluehost. I register them with a company called Namecheap. So I'm going to go there next, and just because I know I'm going to add on this domain to my Bluehost account, I just have to head on over to Namecheap and make sure that my domain name is pointing to Bluehost name servers. And I should just mention the website that I'm going to create is actually the website that and blog that I'm going to be hosting these videos on and creating content around starting a blog and podcast. So the new domain that I'm going to create is called howtostartablogandpodcast.com. So what I've done here is I've just typed howtostartablogandpodcast.com into the address bar in Google and hit enter, and this is what pops up. So you can see that welcome, this domain was recently registered at namecheap.com, and the rest of this is just default information down here. So this tells me, without even looking at my Namecheap account, that my domain name is not pointing at Bluehost servers. So I'm going to go and do that now. Okay, so I've logged into my Namecheap account, and I've gone to manage domains and modify the domain howtostartablogandpodcast.com. I've clicked over here to transfer DNS to webhost, and that's the DNS's domain name server. If you're not using Namecheap as your registrar, you'll have a button similar to this. Every registrar has a way to change your DNS information. And of course, once again, if you choose to use Bluehost as your domain name registrar, you can skip all this because they will automatically point to their servers. So I'm just going to scroll down here and enter the Bluehost servers, which are ns1.bluehost.com and ns2.bluehost.com. That's done. I'm just going to save the changes. So it's been about 10 minutes or so since I've pointed my domain name to the Bluehost servers. So I'm just going to check by typing in the URL again. And we can see, in fact, that the domain name is pointing to Bluehost servers. So we can go back into cPanel and scroll down to where you see add-on domains in cPanel and just double-click on that. So the first thing we have to do is enter a domain. You're either using a domain name that you already have associated with your account. So if you registered your domain with Bluehost, you may be able to just find it in this drop-down menu. I have my domain registered with Namecheap, so I'm just going to enter it here, and it's how to start a blog and podcast.com. And it's just verifying the domain. You can see, and ownership is verified, and you can see that the domain name servers are set to Bluehost servers. So we're going to go down and choose either an add-on domain or a park domain. So an add-on domain is what we want, and that points to a different subdirectory on your account, and it looks like an entirely different website. A park domain or a pointed domain, you can see from the description here, it's a domain name that points to the same directory as your primary domain. So I could set up another domain name to point to my deliberatepersonalfinance.com site if I wanted to, for example. But in this case, I want a totally separate site, so we're going to do an add-on domain. Scroll down, and And we're going to choose a directory for this new domain to live in. And it's just going to be public HTML, how to start a blog and podcast. That's fine. And I think we're ready. And this is fine where it says subdomain, how to start a blog and podcast .deliberatepersonalfinance.com. That's not going to show up anywhere else. So we can just click add domain. Okay, so it took about 30 seconds or so for that add-on domain to be created, and it gives you a little message down here that it's created the domain record, and it's just processing the new domain. It tells you to wait for about 5 to 15 minutes for this task to complete, so we're going to do that. And you can see now that I've got 2 domains associated with this account. My primary domain is deliberatepersonalfinance.com, and now I've got an add-on domain that is how to start a blog and podcast.com. So I'm just going to wait for this 5 to 15 minutes till this message changes, and I'll show you what to do next. So it just took a couple minutes, and that domain is now assigned and everything's ready to go. So we're going to go back into our cPanel. And what we need to do now is install WordPress on that site. So we're going to go down, click WordPress. And of course we want to install it. Okay, so the first thing it wants to know is what version of WordPress we want to install, and we always want to pick the most recent one, which in this case is 3.2.1. Now where do we want to install the WordPress installation? And we want it to go in a folder called How to Start a Blog and Podcast. And let's just click to display the advanced options. You don't have to do this, but let's give our site a name. And I'm just going to create a temporary password. So we're just going to say that we've read all the terms and conditions and continue. Okay, so it shows me that the installation is complete. WordPress has been installed. It reminds me of my username and password. And next I'm going to go to Google and just see if the site is actually up and running. Okay, so now that the WordPress installation is complete, I should be able to go to the Google address bar, type in my URL, and up will pop my brand new WordPress site, How to Start a Blog and Podcast. So there's one more change that I have to make. It's very important. You'll see here that the URL is correct. If I click on another page or anything else on my website, see what happens in the address bar? It goes back to www.deliberatepersonalfinance.com/how to start a blog and podcast. That's not what we want. What it's showing here is the actual directory where this website is living on my Bluehost account. And I don't want this deliberatepersonalfinance.com to ever, or any other URL for that matter, to show up on this website. So what we need to do is log into the dashboard, and it happens to give you a little link here. So you just use your username and password that you created earlier. I'm not sure if that was right. And log into the dashboard. You're going to go to Settings, and under the General tab, which is where it brings you, you're going to change your WordPress address URL to, going to get rid of the Deliberate Personal Finance. So you just make it how to start a blog and podcast.com, and the same thing down here. And then we're just going to save those changes. We're going to go back to Google, type in our URL. The site pops up. Now we can click on any page we want, and it gets rid of that deliberatepersonalfinance.com reference. And it's always, no matter what we press on here, it's always how to start a blog and podcast.com. And that's just how easy it is to create an add-on domain in your Bluehost account.